How did a young immigrant from China, arriving in America with just $50 in his pocket, become one of the most respected eye surgeons in the world? And how did studying the science of vision shatter his atheism and lead him to Jesus? After training at Harvard and MIT, Dr. Ming Wang has given sight to millions, and in the human eye, he found compelling proof of a creator. Dr. Wang, thanks so much for being with us. I'm honored to be able to talk to you, and I'm really excited to get to know you better and to have our listeners and viewers get to know you better. Let's just start at the beginning, because your backstory is incredible. It's remarkable, and I just want to start there. So take us back to your childhood and what that was like for you growing up in China.
Thank you, Pastor Eric, for the opportunity to be on Maybe God podcast show. I grew up in China in the 1960s, and I gone through this very difficult period of time called Cultural Revolution. From 1966 to 1976, for 10 years, the government shut down all universities and colleges of entire China and forcefully deported to some of the poorest part of the country and condemned each one of those high school graduates to a lifetime of poverty and hard labor. Over a 20-year period during Cultural Revolution, they deported 20 million youth for life. So I call that in the mid-1970s. I was 14 in 1974, and I was not allowed to go to high school, despite being a straight student. And together with 20 million others, I was going to be sent away to labor camp for life. In order to avoid that devastating fate of being sent away to labor camp for life, I found that, actually my parents helped me find that if I could play a music instrument, Chinese violin called erhu, E-R-H-U, or if I could learn to dance, I might be able to get into the government song and dance troupe, therefore avoid being sent away to labor camp.
Wow. Let me just interject here before we get too far into the story and just talk about, so it sounds like your family might have been part of a lower middle class, impoverished part of China. Is that correct? Because you were being sent off to these camps, and you said that was
right.
Mostly for poor kids?
Actually, all the youth, every single high school graduate was sent away, not just whoever they did not like. But my parents happened to be intellectual. My mother is a teacher, and my father is actually a doctor, but very poor. Everybody was poor during that time. So to give you a sense how poor we were, the combined salaries of my parents, every month, the combined salaries for both of them, for family of four, me and my younger brother and my parents, was only $15 US.
Wow. That's not a lot.
Very poor.
Goodness.
That home side. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the angle for the government at the time? What was their reason for wanting to shut down universities and schools and keep a generation of young Chinese people from learning?
I think they did not want to have anybody challenge their dictatorship. Anybody with knowledge and education could challenge them.
Yeah. So without any criminal charges or justifications, a young person like yourself could be sent off for a lifetime of forced labor.
Right. Every single high school graduate for 10 years. Universities were shut down for 10 years during Cultural Revolution.
And if I'm doing the math, that started when you were about 6 years old?
Yes.
What's your earliest memory from that time in your life?
It was chaotic, chaos. And as you see in the film Sight, distributed by NG Studios, that the Red Guards came to ransack the university. And my parents have to put me in the closet in order to escape, otherwise I could be killed by the Red Guards. And it was during that, I was like 8 or so when that happened. And it's interesting, years later, as you see in the film Sight, that situation that I was locked up in a medical specimen closet, there was actually, I saw a baby in a jar. That was what gave me the inspiration decades later to develop the amniotic placental contact lens idea to restore eyesight in the blind.
Wow. Amazing how God works in the most dire circumstances sometimes.
Yes.
We'll talk more about that process and that discovery in your work in a bit. And I do hope that everybody watching checks out the movie Sight that is based on your life story. It's incredible and it's done very well. And so anybody watching that wants to know more about you can find your story there. As a child, I can only imagine how harrowing and scary that must have been. What do you remember about your parents specifically and how they sort of got you through that time?
I actually published a Sight, the movie Bible study. Is a movie called Sight. So it's about seeing beyond. The movie talks about seeing beyond 5 things. Seeing beyond our circumstance, ourselves, our own culture, and seeing beyond the challenges we face in life. So seeing beyond circumstance, and that was what my impression was as a child, seeing my parents. Despite the poverty, they were still insisting me study, believing that there could be a better circumstance for their kids for the future. To give you one example, I was about 3 or 4, and I remember vague, recollection. I was playing on the ground. We had a little apartment, the whole family of 4 living in one room, no kitchen, no bathroom, no telephone, and so I remember we could only afford 8 watts of electricity every month.
8
8
watts?
watt is quarter. Yeah, 8 watts, only quarter of your normal average one bulb. That's all we could afford every month, 8 watts. And my father was trying to decide how high or how low he should hand this 8 watt little light tube. If he hand too low, then he could read the books. He's a doctor after all. And then but the whole room is too dark. If he had the little tube too high near the ceiling, the room is illuminated, but he couldn't read. It's too far away from his books. So he was very inventive. He put 2 chairs, one on top of each other. He climbed on top of the second chair. And so he had the light very high. So he's very close to the light tube in the middle of the room near the ceiling. And I remember it was summer day and very, very hot. My father was in shorts, bare-chested, and I was playing on the ground, 3 or 4 years old, looking up, saw my father holding the book, and with this 8 watt light tube right in front of his head, and he was close enough to read the book. And on his back, I saw hundreds of these pearls of sweat.
Wow.
So from that very early on, my parents imprinted me about seeing beyond the circumstance and persevere.
Yeah, working hard and studying no matter what. And it probably got to a point where it was dangerous for your father to even study, and certainly for you to study. So you had to do so in secret, I would imagine. But again, you persevere, right? That's what you learned early on.
Yeah, learn from my parents.
Yeah. It's one thing to tell your kid to persevere, but to show them, that's even more powerful.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure it made an impact. How exactly did they get you out of the trap you were in of being forced to serve in these labor camps?
They tried everything. They tried to have me play the instrument, learning dancing, to try to get into government song and dance propaganda troupe, therefore avoid being sent away to labor camp for life. That did not work. And they then illegally smuggled me into the medical school my mother's teaching. I became an illegal medical student to study medicine with no prospect of becoming a doctor, just to hide away from government finding me and send me away to labor camp.
Wow.
Then I was discovered by the medical school. I was illegally studying medicine, so they kicked me out. And then I tried music. I tried everything that my parents and I tried to avoid being sent away to labor camp failed. So I was going to be sent away to labor camp for sure. Right around then, that was 1976. I was 16. The Cultural Revolution ended.
What ended it?
The leader died.
Okay.
Yeah. So China woke up, realized what a tragic mistake it has made by shutting down universities and colleges for 10 years and having destroyed the future of one whole generation of young people. So they quickly reopened all the colleges. And I remember I only had like junior high school education. When I was 14, I got kicked out of school after 9th grade. So I didn't attend senior high, was not allowed to. And then my parents came on with a newspaper. My father showed me that now the university are reopened. You may be able to go back to school. I thought I would never be able to hear that. I said, when? He said, tomorrow. I said, should I go back to 9th grade? 3 years ago, I got kicked out after 9th grade. He said, no, go back all the way tomorrow to 12th grade.
Wow.
I said, you want me to jump ahead 3 years overnight, having never studied 10th, 11th, 12th? He said, correct. I said, why? He said, then you can apply for college right away. I said, even if somehow magically I became a 12th grader overnight, jumping 3 years ahead overnight, what's my chance of getting in? What percentage? What percent of the graduating 12th grade could get into college? My father said, this year, there were 10 times more applicants because all the students who were deported.
Right.
10 years prior to that, all coming back for applying for college right now because college was shut down for 10 years. So we had 10 times more applicants. It's about only less than 1% chance of the 12th graders, the graduating class, could get into college. I said, wait a minute, let me get this straight. You want me to jump 3 years ahead, magically into 12th graders have never studied 10th, 11th, 12th, and somehow compete against other 12th graders for the 1% chance or less than 1% chance of getting to college? He said, correct. I said, you guys are crazy. And my mom said, we're not crazy. She said, how long did the government shut down colleges? I said, 10 years. She said, okay, is there any guarantee? They open the college now, but is there a guarantee they will not shut down college again next year for another 10 years? So you see, for people who did not have freedom, when freedom briefly came, they appreciate it. And that also applies to our country today. We live in a free country, but for folks who were born here, who always had freedom, sometimes it's human nature to take that freedom for granted.
That's correct. And a lot of us are guilty of that. I want to talk more in a minute about how you ended up in the United States. But first, that's a fascinating story and just a reflection of a loving parent's heart. That is, unlikely as it was, the 1% chance. 1% is infinitely greater than zero, I guess. And they knew that as quickly as times had changed in the past, they could change again. And so let's take our chance now and go for it. That's powerful. Your parents strike me as people of faith, but were you raised with any kind of faithful worldview? Were you raised religious? I mean, what was that like?
No, my family was over 95% of Chinese families were all atheists. And even today, 95% of Chinese are still atheists today. And so the worldview is the atheist worldview, but a world that pay lots of attention to education, scholarship. So that was very fortunate because as I mentioned, that despite the poverty, my parents insisted education. So he did expose me to lots of world literature, lots of books which were banned from the West. So I got a glimpse of Christian faith from some of the novels that I read as a kid.
Wow. I can only imagine that was probably a dangerous thing to do during the Cultural Revolution.
All these books from the West were banned.
How did you and your father even have those? Were they hidden?
Yes. I remember in our home just one room, entire family of 4 crowding one room, and on the shelf there are all these government books, but behind some of those red books, government books, there are these Western books.
The old hidden book trick. Do you recall having any personal thoughts or reflections or curiosities about a higher power as a child? I mean, I don't know what that's like growing up in a culture like that.
Yeah, did not grow up with that understanding. However, I was curious because of the limited exposure to Western culture and the novels written by folks, here in the West. because my father managed to let me in some of these. Illegally, it was all banned, these books. So I was curious. And in terms of the understanding that perhaps there's a creator, there's a larger power influencing our life. Isn't it interesting that decades later, after I became a Christian, by the way, you might have seen the film God's Not Dead, a wonderful Christian film. In that film, the student who came from China, surviving Cultural Revolution, riding a bicycle in the beginning of the film, did not believe in God. But at the end of the film, he was the first one stood up in a classroom declaring God is not dead. And that student's story is inspired by my life story. Just like that student.
That's amazing.
Yes.
I mean, what kind of life do you have to live to have not one movie, but two based on your story? Just incredible. Another reason why I'm so honored to be able to talk to you today. One more question about your childhood before we move on to coming to the U.S. What happens to there is a universal human inclination toward prayer. Every civilization has had an element of prayer, historically speaking, but in a enforced atheism sort of worldview that you grew up with, what happens to that inclination or that instinct to pray, when times are hard or when you're hungry or whatever? Who do you pray to, if at all?
It was such a great question, Pastor Eric. Absolutely. I noticed that it's a universal human inclination to wanting to, send wishes to a higher power to bless their lives and all that. During this atheist China, that what government wanted is that power is the leader of the Communist Party. And so if you have trouble, you want help, you ask the leader to help. It's a human being rather than a power beyond human being. So in that case, I think it's many of those atheist countries are similar in the sense that there's a human being who trying to take the role of the powerful.
I've heard that about Russia or the Soviet Union under Stalin, where kids were forced to or taught to pray to Stalin to give them candy or whatever a kid wants. And they would close their eyes in a classroom and be led in a prayer to Stalin. And then when they opened their eyes, the candy would be on their desks in front of them. It was highly manipulative and a way of supplanting that God-shaped hole in our hearts with a human being.
Correct. It's just like North Korea today.
Right. Yeah. Yep. These patterns repeat themselves, don't they? People are predictable sometimes. Okay. So let's talk about how you ended up in the United States. At what age did you migrate and under what circumstances? What was that like?
So during Cultural Revolution, as I mentioned earlier, that with my parents' help, I was very fortunate. They were really dedicated in helping me. I managed to get into college, jumping through practically the senior high school. And I got enrolled in University of Science and Technology of China, which is like the MIT of China.
Right.
Very technical college. And I studied chemical physics, laser physics. And then in 1982, with $50 borrowed from a visiting American professor, I was dropped at National Airport, Washington, D.C., came to America with that $50, with a Chinese English dictionary, knowing no one in this country, could hardly speak English, even though I was nearly penniless. But guess what? I was happy. Why? I was free.
Yeah. I can only imagine what that was like. But how did it happen? It seems so unlikely. How did someone intervene for you and make that possible?
It was I was very fortunate. The university decided they're going to send some students who had better, good grades to America. But I have to find my own opportunity, in terms of supporting myself financially.
Wow.
They wouldn't give me any money. So there was a professor who was from America visiting our university in China. As you see in the film side, I was trying to impress him, this American professor, hope he will help me to come to America at university to study. So I was trying to impress him with my English. But my English is so poor that he didn't understand what I was asking. I got embarrassed because I I couldn't pronounce it right, and he couldn't understand what I was saying. But I kept on repeating the same question over and over. But finally, he was impressed, all right, not by my English press, by lack of, but by my persistence.
Mm-hmm.
So at age 21, 1982, with the money that he lended me, $50, that's how I came.
What did you do when you landed with $50 and an English-Chinese dictionary in your pocket?
I out of $50, $30-some was used for a taxi drive from National Airport to the University of Maryland campus. So when I actually got to campus, I only had like $15, $16 left. And I even though together with two other guys in similar circumstance, even though three of us were very poor, but we all very well dressed, because my mother spent 2 months of her salary to have bought me a three-piece suit.
Wow.
You're going to America. They're dressed very nicely.
This is how they dress in America.
Yeah. We may be three of the poorest students on campus in America, but we were probably the best dressed. Yeah. So, but people were laughing. We were way too formal. And so by then I only had $10 left. So how could you dress like America?
Right.
American with only $10. Well, as you see in the film, there was two, Salvation Army. So we went in, came out with a quarter. I can bear a used pair of pants. We came out of Salvation Army dressed like Americans, all right? But we got more laughs because that was 1982. We were dressed in the used clothes, the used clothes people used to wear in the late 1960s. Bell-bottom pants, bright color shirts.
Like the disco or something.
Right.
Oh, that's great. What a great story. But you had to persevere through that too, I guess. Even as people laugh, you just walk your way to class in your bell-bottoms.
That's right.
What did you decide to study at Maryland?
Laser physics. I got my PhD in laser physics. And then after that, postdoc at MIT. So at age 26, I was a young physicist with a doctorate degree in laser physics. And I wanted to, I was ready to continue my career as a laser physicist. Except that my dream of becoming a doctor, which I had that dream as a child, just like emulating my father, in China, I was not even allowed to go to high school. So here in America, I said, oh, maybe my dream of wanting to be a doctor can be realized in a free country. So I actually met a professor here in America who actually looked down upon me. I gave him my resume. He was an admission director of a very famous medical school. And he didn't look at my resume. He looked at me. He said, where are you from? I said, China. He said, do you know how hard it is to get into medical school, even for American-born students? You're from China. Don't waste your time. You have no chance. So I almost gave up. I was so discouraged. But I thought, well, after Cultural Revolution, I fought once for my own future. Now I can fight again. This time, not just for me, but also for anybody who is being discriminated against just because the color of their skin. Right. So I worked even harder, and eventually I got into Harvard Medical School and MIT joint MD program. In 1991, I finished. I actually invited my parents over to thank them for having brought me up. So the film Sight is dedicated to my parents.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. It's one of those stories you hear and you're just, I'm in awe, and I'm wondering what I'm doing with my life and all this privilege I've had in my whole life, given how hard you've worked and how much you've overcome. I'm also married to a woman who was a foreign exchange student when I met her from Ecuador, and I know firsthand, as much as I could know, just how difficult it is to be so far away from home at such a young age. I can only imagine you went through some pretty dark times. I mean, even as you were accomplishing so much.
Yes, indeed. I remember for months, probably for a whole year or so, my dream, I lived daytime in America in the university studying. My dream at night were always back in China. Mm-hmm. I was living like a double life. It was very fascinating and very interesting period of time. I remember that the roots were so tight. My parents were back home. I was the only one here. And this challenge of language, challenge of economics. I didn't have money and everything, and I didn't know anyone. Oh, by the way, Pastor Eric, I learned that learning a language is not just learning language. You have to learn the culture.
Mm-hmm.
If someone said, Michael Jordan, you cannot say who, you know, the culture as well. So I have to learn both culture and the language quickly. And I found the best way, watching movies. There was rundown theater in Washington, D.C. With $1, I could see 2 feature films, old Hollywood films. So for the whole almost 2 years, I went to their theaters all the time, and I saw hundreds of American films. So I've probably seen more classic Hollywood films than most average Americans.
I imagine so.
Like It's a Wonderful Life,
Yeah.
It's and Wizard of Lost Arts,
Yeah.
It's just Wizard of Arts, and it's just amazing. So I have to learn the language quickly. So here's the interesting thing. Sometimes we as human beings, we do not know the purpose of the suffering and difficulty we go through, the purpose of it.
Yeah.
However, only God knows. But looking back, sometimes realize that God has a purpose for us, even though at the time we did not realize.
Mm-hmm.
Now looking back, I realized that coming to an entirely different country, traveling literally from one side of the earth to the other, dramatic different language, culture, everything, the tremendous difficulty leaving my home back, family back home. In some ways, it is actually an advantage, because what it did is to stretch me, to very thin. At age 21, I had to work so much harder, but as a result, I ended up being able to build determination and perseverance, the character, and exposure to a wider range of culture at a young age.
Yeah. You mentioned God and his role in our suffering. That's one of the age-old questions is it God's will for us to go through some of the most difficult things we go through? Was the Cultural Revolution in China God's will? And it's just one of those things we'll never quite know for sure how that works, but we do know for sure that God works in whatever we go through to redeem it and make sense of it, and oftentimes to make it right. As you've experienced, who knows if it was God's perfect will for you to go through what you did, but certainly he showed up. So let's talk about that for a second. And how did you go from being born and raised atheist and having that worldview to being a believer in God, and specifically a believer and follower of Jesus Christ?
I just as the film God's Not Dead, that's the student who came from China, was an atheist, eventually at the end of the film became a believer, who declared in the classroom, the first one in the classroom declaring God is not dead. That was inspired by my life story, as I mentioned. I came here after surviving Cultural Revolution, came to a free country. I was not interested in anything except science. And I felt that science will save the world as an answer to everything. But it's interesting. After PhD in laser physics, I started studying medicine. It was in Harvard Medical School, in the study of medicine, where I was exposed to God. It's interesting because I remember with a PhD degree and I studied MD, so I want to be a laser eye surgeon, because I combined the laser physics expertise with medicine. So I was studying the structure and function of human eye. I realized it was so complex that I realized that the more I study, more impossible that I could explain everything I was studying based on atheist worldview of random events, random collisions. In fact, I learned that the number of cells in our brain that involved in visual processing is more than half of our entire brain.
Goodness.
So how important vision is, for our senses. But not only that, the number of these cells involving vision, capturing, and processing in each of our head, the number of cells is greater than the number of stars that we have ever discovered in the entire universe.
Wow.
So here's the trouble. All these stars has to line up within a short span of 9 months from inception to birth of human being. And there's so many chances this alignment could be go wrong. In fact, it would be a miracle if it ever go right. And if any of those cells did not arrange, line up well, the person will be born blind.
Yeah.
But then most of us born, we can see. So I was in crisis. My atheist worldview of random events collision could not explain such a complexity of human eye and yet can form in such a nearly perfect fashion, and most of the time. So I was doing a rotation at Harvard Medical School, and I asked a professor there, I said, why this case? And after being asked this question for a while, he ended up as a Christian, but I didn't know at the time. He took me out to lunch. He said, Ming, what's a cross street? I said, there's a car. He said, what's the difference between a car and a human eye? I said, human eye is a lot more complicated. He said, okay. Can you imagine a pile of random pieces of metal on the street form itself into a car? I said, no way. He then leaned over, he said, how about human eye? So in one instant, he opened a window in my life, making me realize that the reason the human eye is so complicated, yet it can form nearly perfectly almost every time, is because it did not form out of randomness. It was formed with a purpose, and that purpose is vision. And there's a designer behind it. Now, going from that point, realizing there's a creator, to eventually realize that the creator has a name in Jesus Christ, that took me several more years.
Yeah.
As described in my autobiography, From Darkness to Sight, which eventually turned into movie.
Right.
Sadly.
Yeah. I want to talk more about that process of going from God generally to specifically to Jesus, but that's a very interesting thing for a Harvard professor to say. And as you said, you learned later he was a believer, but you didn't know it at the time. I'm not an expert at all in Darwinian theory or anything, but I do recall him stating at some point that he had that the eye was a challenge to his theory.
Yes, actually, at the end of his book, the Evolutions of the Survival of the Fittest, Darwin himself realized that the complexity of the eye and the inability to explain the eye through evolutionary theory is his Achilles tendon. He actually admitted that that is the weakest point of his evolutionary theory. And it's interesting. 100 years later, I found the same thing independently myself. That studying through the structure of the studying of human complexity, human eye, I arrived at came up with the same realization. It is impossible for atheist worldview to explain the random collision, to explain the complexity of human eye.
What about the argument that, we're talking about billions of years or however long it's been since evolution began, and, over that span of time and all the many, many, many generations of different species leading up to the human species, again, in the evolutionary mindset, this could have happened. Is that beyond the pale for you? Is it impossible in your view?
Yeah, it's impossible. That was my very trouble, because the number of cells is so vast and the alignment has to be so nearly perfect. It would have taken trillions of years. And the universe has only been in existence for 13.6 billion years, much, much shorter. And so, in other words, the mathematical impossibility of the vast alternative probabilities of recombinations of these brain cells, those retinal cells, ganglion cells in the head involve visual processing, make it impossible that these can form together so in such short period of time. And that is the mathematical argument, because I found evidence of existence of creator through science.
Yeah. Is there something unique about the human eye then? Because other species have less complex, eye and visual systems, I guess, again, speaking as a pastor, not a scientist. But it seems like there are less complex, more simple eyes out there in other species that could have led to the human eye. Is there something that sets the human eye apart?
It's such a great question. Such a great question. As a scientist, I've studied the material basis of the world and the scientific logic. And at the same time, as I mentioned, I became a believer. So the question is ultimately what sets human being apart from other, not just the structure of the eye, but the entire human being. And I've come to realize that there's a fundamental difference, because it's just this notion, the understanding, the soul. It's hard to explain. However, we do know that as human being, it's not just merely the physical presence. We have certain intuition, there's certain understanding, and certain connection to the Creator that give us a sense of purpose, and that is absent in animal world.
Yeah.
So I think not only human eye is uniquely complex, but also the human being is uniquely soulful.
Fascinating. So I can only try to imagine what this was like for you when you realized there might be a God behind creation, behind the universe, behind the eye. You stood to lose a lot by professing such a belief. I mean, not just your family, which, was adamantly opposed, I guess, to such an idea, but friends back home, professionally, I suppose it's not the norm to be a professing believer in God in your line of work. Did you have any hesitations about opening your heart to that possibility of God?
Yes, I did, and I still do have hesitations. For example, I was in China recently. We have this China Bible project, and we bring Bible to China. And I brought the film, which the film site is banned in China.
Yeah.
Because it's depicting Cultural Revolution and the Christian faith. And so I took the film, the DVD back home, and I showed, secretly to friends and give them Bible. And I've been doing the China Bible Project for 2 decades. And so it's always back in my mind, that could bring trouble to me.
Yeah.
However, I feel that as Christian, we all realize that God paid the ultimate price, by dying for our sin at the cross. And, any of those small sacrifices as a Christian that we should make if it's going to help spread the word of Jesus Christ.
Wow.
To a country that need that belief so much today. China's economically developing so fast. With economic development come corruption.
Yeah.
And I was approached by a few Chinese officials over the decades with our China Bible Project. Why you want to spread Christian faith? I said, do you know the difference between a believer and not a believer? And these government officials said, what? I said, somebody who truly believes in Jesus Christ is going to behave differently. He said, in what way? I said, if someone who truly believes in Jesus Christ knows that even when no other human being is looking at him, Jesus is. So there's some fundamental sense of accountability. So wouldn't that curtail or reduce corruption in China?
Yeah.
So, I said, see, it's good to believe.
Wow. That's a risky thing to say, I would imagine, given what little I know about how life is working in China these days and the attempts to suppress Christianity. But as you said, if we're following Jesus, who laid his life down for everyone, we should be willing to do the same as much as possible to spread the word. When did that transition from believing in God generally to Christianity happen? Was there someone that led you across that threshold? And do you remember a moment when you became a Christian?
It was a period of time when I was spending time with a group of Christian physicians and see their model behavior as a compassionate physicians who are believers and also take great care of their patients. And through spending time with them, I learned resurrection. I learned this powerful incidents where God laid down his life for all of us, and realized that Christianity, faith in Jesus Christ, is a very specific form of proving existence of Creator that I can relate to, and there's a human action that I can follow, and also these believers actually manifest the true spirit of Christian faith, serving people as physicians as such. So it was through the influence over a period of time, these Christian physicians, that eventually led me to Jesus Christ specifically.
Wow. I love hearing different stories about how God reaches different people in different ways. And a lot of times, it's a story like this where it's very pragmatic. You see the outworking of Christian faith in your peers that you admire. And it seems to work for them and the people around them in such powerful ways that you want more of what they have. And then you sort of live your way into it. But was there ever a personal encounter you had with the Holy Spirit or with Jesus where you were confronted with your sin, that sort of classic conversion story, and you received Christ in some supernatural way? Or was it actually a pragmatic walking out of faith that just fit for your worldview?
It's mostly pragmatic, walking step closer to Jesus Christ overall. But I did have one overarching realization that years later, after I came to America, I realized is when I look back, my suffering during Cultural Revolution as a child, as a teenager. At the time, I did not understand the purpose of those sufferings. And it was later, after I became a Christian, I realized, looking back, perhaps God did have a purpose for me. Going through those sufferings will help me build my character, determination, be able to sustain and persevere through challenges, but also being connected with blind orphan children, the kids who suffer in darkness. And that's why I built the foundation to help them, and that's the basis of the film site. So in other words, there is an overarching realization over time that perhaps God had the purpose for me to go through those difficulties.
Yeah.
And that is such a powerful realization that cemented my belief.
And then to turn it all around and help others. I want to talk more about that in just a sec. One more question about your conversion to Christianity. Did you talk to mom and dad back home about becoming a Christian? And if so, how did that go?
Yes, I have been. In the film God's Not Dead, the student who went from atheist to believer, as I said, it was based on my life story, that he fought against his father who object to the notion of Christian faith. And it was true for me too. And it's interesting that over the years, I've been trying to expose them to Christian faith, but they were pretty much stay the way they were. However, when the film God's Not Dead came out, I made a point showing that film to my parents. And my parents saw me in that film, God's Not Dead, and saw the transforming effect that Christian faith has placed on me. They saw in real eyes over the years, but also in a film, the powerful way. And so I actually, after film, I asked my dad, I said, your son is a believer. He didn't turn out to be too bad, didn't he? And he nodded his head. I thought that really as kind of start changing their heart, seeing the transformation and change of their son, who went from just, my purpose is for myself, to a larger purpose. That my purpose is to help those kids, blind orphan children who needs the most help. And they saw that foundations work over the decades in real action. So I think my trying to become a truly good Christian and a doctor, helping the kids, blind orphan children, helped impact my parents as well.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, I hope I didn't speak out of turn when I said your parents strike me as people of faith. I didn't mean to imply that they're by any means Christians or anything, but anyone who sacrifices so much for their children in such a selfless way and who values and prioritizes understanding and learning over, even in the face of danger from government or, officials and things, that suggests something about their character that is just a half step away from true faith and the true God. It's the heart of God on display. And so I think that that's fertile ground to have that conversation with someone who's already inclined in that direction. I really appreciate you sharing your testimony as you have, because I think people need to hear it. It's not everyone comes to faith in Christ by Damascus Road, lightning experience where everything changes all at once. Sometimes it's the living out of faith and seeing the fruit of Christian living that actually leads people to discipleship.
Absolutely. I think this is one of the most powerful yet sometimes undervalued way of we as Christians can behave, because through our own action, we can influence the non-believers, help them see God through what we do ourselves.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, it's also no weaker statement of faith by Christians. We do do things in an unchristian way, because they will have the opposite effect. So it's so important for us as Christians to truly live in a Christ-like way.
Yeah. Jesus said, by your love, they will know, right, that you're my disciples. And sometimes we just want to say, we just want to tell the world what's right instead of showing them, and preach at them instead of just living like Christ and letting that be our witness. And so that's a good reminder for us all. How has that Christian inspiration to live a life of love and sacrifice for others impacted your work as you got into your career as a eye surgeon, specifically the laser surgeries, corrective vision surgeries? How did that desire to help others shape your career as it is today?
In two specific ways. One is after years of training in medicine, Pastor Eric, guess how many years I've gone to school? 31 years.
Goodness.
From age 6 to age 37, I keep on going to school and training. I got 2 doctorate degrees, as I mentioned, one PhD in laser physics, one MD from Harvard and MIT. So after 31 years of studying, I finally got it down. I was ready to work and to make a difference. I realized that very quickly, a sense of purpose that instilled in me from Christ. That is, I need to use my science, the hard-earned science, to help those who need the most help, these blind orphan children. And in many ways, I realized that God allowed me to go through the difficulty during Cultural Revolution, those dark days that as a teenager, I saw no future in my life. My life's outlook was dark. To now I can connect that feeling to the situation of these kids who are living in darkness. I can relate to them, and I want to help them. So that's God instilled the purpose for me. So I want to use my science to help them. So that's the first specific impact. A second specific impact is in the process of helping these kids, as you see in the film site. I saw this 5-year-old Indian orphan who was intentionally blinded by her own stepmother back in India, who was trying to make Kajol, the 5-year-old orphan, a blind orphan child who then can sing on the streets, who can beg, then get more money.
So if she's blind and singing on the street, she'll get more compassion and more money.
Right.
Got it.
It was malicious. She was maliciously blinded, but then she was found to have no talent of singing. She couldn't sing. That's why she was abandoned in a train station. That's how we found her. And now our foundation brought her to America, as you see in the film site. So the film site is Kajol's remarkable journey to try to come from darkness to light. So when I first saw Kajol, her eye was completely scarred, and due to the intentional blinding incident, and there was no treatment for scarred blood vessel grown human eye. And so I started research. I really want to help Kajol, help bring her out of darkness, because I used to be in darkness myself. So I found that the only way to restore her eyesight, reduce the scar, is to study human fetus, because an unborn child can heal without scar. But how could you do research on human fetus, unborn child, to help patients like Kajol without hurting the fetus?
Right.
And, they say there's no common ground between science and faith in that regard. And this actually speaks to the larger issue today with the rapid development of science, genetic engineering, stem cells, and many young people leaving faith because they don't believe faith offers solution to this conflict between science and faith.
Right.
So I wanted to do research on fetal tissue, but I want to help Kajol, but at the same time preserving life at the same time. So it was too much prayer, and eventually I felt that God was giving me an idea, and I was working with a group of scientists that perhaps the way to tap the fountain of youth, the fetal scarlet healing, is to use the placenta. So because before birth, we're all surrounded by the placenta, the amniotic membrane. Maybe the amniotic membrane used to surround all of us before birth is what gives the unborn child the ability to heal without scar. So I got lots of placenta donated to me by mothers after giving birth to children. The placenta is discarded anyway. And I brought those placentas back to the laboratory and I started doing research. Eventually, I developed the amniotic placenta contact lens. When I put this amniotic placenta contact lens onto injured eyes, miracle happened. The eye stopped behaving as if it were not born yet. It started healing, regenerating without scar.
Wow.
Eyesight restored. Then I asked myself, did I invent the amniotic membrane contact lens? Interestingly, I concluded no, because I did not invent the placenta. I did not invent the amniotic membrane. God did. As a physician and scientist, I was privileged to have given this opportunity by God to catch a little glimpse of part of his original creation. So the glory belongs to him. So what I decided to do is to donate my patent. So I donated my patent. I put it on online so everybody saw it. In fact, I went around the world over a 20-year period, free of charge, taught over 10,000 eye doctors throughout the world in over 50-some countries how to use this technology. Today, amniotic membrane contact lens has helped restore eyesight in millions of patients, are used worldwide, and it's a $5 billion a year industry.
Wow.
Some friends said, "Oh, Ming, you're stupid. You did not because I don't my patent in the beginning." I said, "I'm not stupid because as not only a scientist but also a Christian, I realized that where the credit should really go."
Wow. Wow. That is such a powerful story, Dr. Wang, because you're right. The world is polarized on an issue like stem cell research, for example.
Right.
You know, you've got maybe secular scientific folks that say we should help as many people as we can and do the research necessary, even if, you know, we have some questionable ethical issues with fetal tissue. Then you've got, you know, some conservative Christian voices and other conservative voices saying we should stop all this research because even if we can help people, we shouldn't mess with fetal tissue. And just another example of how Jesus Christ in his infinite wisdom helps us find that common ground that you value so much, which is the desire to heal and help as many people as possible and the desire to honor life. And a lot of times those answers are there if we'll look for them, as your research has shown.
Absolutely. A moment ago, Pastor Eric, we talked about what is, there's no more powerful example demonstrate the power of faith by Christians live out like Jesus Christ, but also opposite is true. There's no weaker statement of our power of faith by Christians who acted out in the un-Christ way. And in the realm of polarization, division in our country today, unfortunately, many Christians are living the opposite way as Jesus Christ. They are some of the worst polarizers, you know, and I think it's important for us to recognize that being a Christian ultimately means emulating Christ, live in a Christ-like way. Christ have found a common ground with us. He saw us as a human being. He actually became one of us.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate way of seeking common ground. He died for our sin at the cross. He became one of us because he wants to feel what we feel, to suffer what we suffer. So to be a Christ means exactly what the Bible said. Love your neighbor, love your enemies. We're able to love the people despite the difference, work together despite the difference.
Yeah.
That's actually the most powerful way of showing the power of Jesus Christ, and the opposite is true.
Right.
If Christians, some are the worst polarizers, and the person who is the least tolerant of people who are different from him or her, that is actually the weakest statement of the strength of faith.
Yeah. Sometimes we let our own insecurities and prejudices get in the way of being truly Christian witnesses. And sometimes it's fear, I guess, but we shouldn't be afraid. We should lead with love like Jesus did, you know, while also honoring the principles of Scripture, like, you know, the sanctity of life. And you've found a way to do that through your work. Going back to Kajol, I've watched the movie, so I kind of know the story. But for folks that haven't seen the movie, if you plan to watch the movie, if you're watching this interview and you plan to go watch the movie, speed ahead a few minutes in this interview so you don't get a spoiler here. But tell us how Kajol's story unfolded and what you learned from her.
Yeah. As I said, the film site is about Kajol's remarkable journey to try to come from darkness to light. And how in the process, that she, as my patient, has also helped me come from my own darkness to light emotionally and spiritually, that helped me find a way to be at peace with the past and move on. And so that's the essence of this film site. And the Kajol, because of inspiration, they're trying to help her and her suffering, that and many of other patients I helped over the years. I developed this amniotic membrane contact lens technology. And, in the film, there's a powerful scene that shows that, Kajol's the one who taught me there's more to life than what we see. Every one of us has two kinds of sight: the physical side, which is I spend every day in helping people to restore the medical, but also the spiritual side. And we need both.
Yeah.
And so Kajol is one that shows that even when no light is coming in from outside, light could emanate from within if one has Christ in one's heart.
Amen. Were you able to fully restore Kajol's sight?
I was hesitating, Pastor Eric. We want to encourage people to watch the film. That's why I kind of basically didn't answer the question that what happened to Kajol. I would say this way: I would still want people to see the film because I think the transforming effect of watching the film is powerful. But I was in the process. I'm in the process of reconnecting with Kajol, and guess what? She returned to India after her remarkable experience in America, helped by our foundation. She went to college. She even got a master because she was loved when she was here.
Wow. Praise God. I know that you have done a ton of charity work. Could you just talk about how wide-reaching that's been and how important it is to you, in addition to your practice and being a movie star and all of that? But you have a lot of international work that you're doing even today.
I'm not a movie star. I always say that I'm famous in my house. Everyone knows me. First of all, what I realized that science is necessary, is a tool, but Jesus Christ is the purpose. And every one of us, God will give us different purpose depending on what we do, our life's journey. For me, suffering through Cultural Revolution, came to America as an atheist, find freedom and the faith in America. The purpose I realized God has for me is utilizing my 31 years of studying medicine to help those who need the most help, which are blind orphan children. And that is my why I devote part of my life to help these kids. And I do two kinds of surgeries. One is regular laser vision correction for people like you and me. The goal is to treat nearsightedness, farsightedness, astigmatism. We can also treat the presbyopia. We can get rid of reading glasses now. And we also, basically one surgery, I published the first two textbooks, is able to one surgery for patient over age 45, we can correct all the problems. The nearsighted, farsighted, astigmatism, presbyopia, and one will never develop cataract either. So it's one surgery for every young lens. So I've been involved in doing that research and helping folks. At the same time, another part of my life is the charity work to help kids. And the foundation has been going on for 20-some years. We have helped patients from all over the world, 50-some countries. And these foundation patients, the medical care is free. And however, it's interesting, I mentioned earlier during Cultural Revolution, I have to learn to play the music instrument, Chinese violin, erhu, and learn how to dance to avoid being sent away to labor camp. Now, these things I've learned in Cultural Revolution to survive, it's been useful. I combine the dancing skill that I learned during Cultural Revolution to survive with my medical charity. I create a concept called the eyeball. It's a medical fundraiser to raise money to help these kids. Even though the medical care for these kids are free, but we raise money for their travel, schooling, and the living, no medical cost. And also the instrument I during Cultural Revolution I learned, Chinese violin to avoid labor camp has become a hobby, and I use it to connect East and West.
Yeah. Also to connect with Dolly Parton, of all people, which I saw you performing with her on one of her songs. It's as if you haven't done enough with your life. You also get to accompany Dolly.
She was my patient. I did her eyes, and one day she walked in. She said, "Dr. Wang, I'm not here for my vision." I said, "What are you here for?" She said, "I heard you play this mean little Chinese violin. I want to make music with you." Now I look at this legend in front of me. I said, You want to make music with me?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Let's do it." She took me to the Blue Ocean Studio, is a music world here in Nashville. And first time I saw this big, huge room with tens of thousands of buttons.
Yeah.
And she said, "We're going to make music." And her idea was she was going to sing a country song, and I was going to play a Chinese violin. We have this unique East and West combination. So we did it. We actually produced a song. She sang an old country song. I played the Chinese violin on a hoop. And when the CD came out, you see, it's Dolly Parton CD. It's got all these famous country stars listed: Dolly Parton, Alison Krauss, and da-da-da-da-da. The last name is Ming Wang. And who is that? Well, it was a really fun collaboration. That what I love about it is bringing East and West. And, it's a shared humanity, which
Common
is
ground.
Our common ground.
That's right. That's so good. If you don't believe in God, just look at Ming Wang on Dolly Parton's album. And what an amazing story. What a wonderful life to bring back one of your favorite American movies that you have lived. That is awesome. So if we have people watching maybe God from all over the world. A lot of missionaries watch, for example, and I'm just thinking they might know someone who might benefit from the Wang Foundation and your work. And if somebody wanted to support your foundation, how would they find more information about that?
Our mission is to help blind orphan children from around the world. We work with many, many missionary groups. So anybody who's traveling around the world in the developing countries and poor parts of the world, if they see a child fit that criteria, the first step is to communicate with us through email. I have my email address, and you can get from maybe God's show.
Yeah, we'll put it in the description.
Great. Email me, and we'll get as much information as we can through online to make an assessment. The chance what's the chance we'll be able to help. If it looks likely we can help, then our foundation take over and we go from there. And so as I mentioned, we have helped patients from all over the world, over 55 some countries. Now, regarding how to support the foundation, the best way to support right now, guess what, is to share the free side movie link that Pastor Eric and maybe Kajol will put on the screen. It's a free link because if you pass this free side movie link to as many folks as you can, it helps the foundation spread the word about our work, so more people will realize these blind orphan children, many of them do have hope, and there's a place they can go for help. So that's literally to expand the scope of foundation work and allow the impact on more kids.
Yeah, amen. Thank you for that, and we will be sure to get all that information in the description of this video, so everybody can find more information about that. Let me just ask one or maybe two more questions about, I'd like you to go back in time in your mind and think about 6-year-old Ming and the Cultural Revolution getting underway and all the difficulty that lays ahead. What would you say to him, knowing what you know now about your life and God and Jesus? And what would you say to him, knowing how scary a time that was? If you could, by some miracle, go back and talk to yourself, your younger self, what would you say?
I would say to a 6-year-old me that life is hard right now, indeed. And, you end up not being able to go to senior high school and going to send away to labor camp like 20 million others for life. But there's a powerful creator who's looking after you, even though you don't see it. The difference between us, mortal human being, and God is we can only see the things already happened to us, but he can see the things which are about to happen to us. So trust in God, believe there's a purpose for the suffering right now, the difficulty. And ultimately, I want to tell the 6-year-old Ming that this human being we see can only see what's immediately in front of us, but there's more to life than what you see.
Wow. That's so good. And it's actually something that so many people need to be reminded of, especially folks that are growing up in difficult circumstances. And we might have some folks in such places and situations watching right now. And I hope you heard that message loud and clear from Dr. Wang. What would you say now, last question, to someone like me, to people who have only known privilege and freedom and sight and have gotten in the habit of taking such things for granted? What would you say to the rest of us, especially Christians, about how we're living our lives?
Thank you for your question, Pastor Eric. I feel so passionate about this particular question that, my fellow Christians, do you know who appreciates sight the most? Those who used to be blind. Mm-hmm. Who appreciate freedom the most? Those who used to not have freedom. So my life story, as Pastor Eric and I discussed on this show, Maybe God, is a journey of someone who used to not have freedom, who came to realize that how precious the freedom we have in America and how important for us not take for granted. Human nature is to take for granted good things when we always have had it. So can we appreciate freedom before we lose it?
Yeah.
So along the line, we are living in the unprecedentedly polarized and divided nation and the world today. We're increasingly fixated on differences rather than appreciating what we all have in common as fellow human beings. We are increasingly unable to work across political aisles, racial divides, and ethnic divisions to solve the problems that we truly need to solve as a nation. Think about all the problems: gun violence, opioid crisis, environmental disasters, poverty, racial tension, education, healthcare, jobs. So we can only solve these problems by being able to work together despite our differences. And human nature humans being so polarized, divided, is because human nature for power, money, and control. Mm. So the story, the film Sight, is ultimately about this message. In order to come together as a nation, in order to truly be able to work together across differences to truly solve the problem we so urgently need to solve as a nation, to rebuild America, to restore our nation. The way to do it is to rise above human nature for power, control, money, which is what divided and polarized us, and heed a higher calling from Jesus Christ. That is, Christ has demonstrated to be the ultimate common ground seeker. He saw the common ground with us as human beings. He became one of us he traded places by becoming one of us. He demonstrated empathy towards people in the lowest rung society, like women by the well in the Bible. Nobody wants to talk to her. Jesus did. He paid the ultimate price by dying for our sin at the cross. And finally, he not just talking about, he actually put into action. He saw the common ground with human beings, suffer what we suffer, feel what we feel. So I think this is a critical moment for all of the Christians to realize that we have a decision to make. We can still, behave humanly, the worldly way, letting our country, the world, sliding towards the deadly spiral of polarization, which will ultimately result in self-destruction of humankind. Or we can realize that if we are truly Christians, we should be like Christ. We should rise above human nature for power, control, money, and division and polarization, and be like Christ to help bring people together, to find a common ground. Because ultimately, it's Christ's love for fellow human being. That is the most powerful message from Christ.
Wow. That's pretty good, Dr. Wang. You're preaching, and I'm ready to vote for you for president. That was so good. You brought me to tears. Thank you for sharing that. Man, who would have thought that a young, poor boy growing up in the south of Shanghai in the Cultural Revolution, almost forced to work his whole life in a labor camp, growing up atheist, and who would have thought that young boy would grow up to be the man who just said what you said, and who's reached millions through your work and your witness. Only God, I think, could do something like that. And we're grateful for you, your testimony, and your time today. And I hope everybody watching or listening will find more about you online in the show notes, but also will go and watch the movie Sight and share it with others because they'll be blessed by it. Dr.
Yes.
Wang, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I want to thank you, Julie, and Pastor Eric, you, and maybe Kajol. And once again, they share the free Sight movie link to as many folks as we can, because they're literally helping our foundation spread the word, so, our work, so we can help more blind orphan children.
Amen.
Thank you.
We'll do what we can. Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
Thank you.